Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Some men carry greatness so quietly, even they don't hear it echo inside them. That's the strange, almost unfair reality of Sigma men. They can be operating at a level most people can barely comprehend, yet still walk around thinking they're just doing what anyone else would do. But here's the twist. Research shows people consistently underestimate their own abilities the more skilled they actually are. In other words, the smarter, sharper, and more capable you are, the more blind you tend to become to your own impact. And with Sigma men, that blindness isn't just a glitch, it's practically part of their operating system. They're the type who'll solve a problem everyone else has been crying about for 3 months, then shrug like they only tightened a loose screw. They'll pull off something impressive. Everyone else is staring in shock, and the Sigma is just there like, relax. It's not that deep. Meanwhile, everyone else is thinking, no, brother, it is that deep. But that right there is where the story gets interesting, because the very traits that make Sigma men exceptional are the same traits that keep them from recognizing that they're exceptional in the first place. Their silence hides their brilliance. Their modesty buries their impact. Their independence deletes the applause before it even hits the air. This isn't about ego, it's about perception, and the quiet war Sigma men fight with their own reflection. So today, we're going deeper than personality labels, deeper than stereotypes, deeper than the social media noise. We're uncovering the real, raw, psychological reasons why Sigma men can't see their own greatness. And trust me, these reasons will hit harder than you expect. Let's get into it. Number 1. They mistake survival skills for normal behavior. Sigma men are masters at navigating life on their own. They've learned to read situations, people, and systems in ways most others can't even begin to comprehend. They solve problems before anyone notices, adapt instantly when the rules change, and operate with a level of mental precision that looks almost unnatural. But here's the catch. Because these skills have been their default for so long, they stop seeing them as remarkable. They take survival for granted, believing it's just how life works. While others struggle with simple challenges, Sigma men have already mapped out solutions, calculated risks, and executed plans without fuss. What seems effortless to them is often years of silent practice and self-discipline condensed into instinctive action. Yet, they rarely pause to acknowledge it. To them, surviving, thriving, and staying 3 steps ahead feels like the baseline, not a superpower. This mindset creates a quiet frustration. The world sees the results, but Sigma men barely notice their own genius because it feels ordinary from the inside. The danger here is subtle. When you live in a constant state of self-reliance, you begin to compare yourself to your own internal bar, which is impossibly high. You notice only what could be improved, what still feels incomplete, or what others fail to understand. The very acts that impress others seem routine to you. A Sigma man might navigate chaos with calm precision, but to himself, he's just keeping his life together. That humility isn't false modesty. It's the product of years spent mastering the art of functioning where most would crumble. This misperception feeds into a loop. Because Sigma men undervalue their skills, they rarely showcase them, which means recognition is scarce. The world judges their greatness from a distance, often admiring them quietly, while the Sigma remains unaware of the extraordinary life he's been building in plain sight. In essence, survival becomes invisibility. The most remarkable capabilities are rendered invisible to the very person wielding them. This is why Sigma men struggle to see their own greatness. What saves their life, shapes their future, and impresses everyone else feels normal to them. Number 2. They overestimate the effort. Others put in Sigma. Men operate on a level of focus, efficiency, and mental clarity that most people can't even approach. They see connections, patterns, and solutions almost instinctively, and they execute with a quiet, disciplined precision. Because of this, they naturally assume others are working at the same speed, processing the same information, and thinking as deeply as they do. They expect effort to mirror their own, and when it doesn't, they often dismiss it as laziness, ignorance, or lack of awareness, never realizing that their own approach is far from average. This mindset makes Sigma men blind to their own brilliance. They underestimate the complexity of what they do simply because it feels natural to them. Solving problems, staying composed under pressure, and moving strategically through life is second nature. They forget that the average person would struggle to perform even a fraction of the things they accomplish daily without breaking a sweat. While a Sigma man might read, analyze, and act on multiple layers of information simultaneously, most people are still trying to process the first layer. Yet, in their mind, this difference isn't extraordinary, it's just normal functioning. The result is an invisible greatness. Sigma men quietly achieve feats that others would find daunting, but they rarely give themselves credit. Their internal comparison is always skewed toward the effort they imagine everyone else is putting in, which makes their own skill, patience, and insight feel underwhelming. They measure their worth against imagined standards rather than reality, which keeps their achievements underappreciated even by themselves. This also fuels a subtle frustration. Sigma men see the gaps between what they do and what others do, and they assume those gaps are insignificant because they've normalized their own effort. They fail to recognize that the difference isn't just a small step. It's a leap that others can barely fathom. Their excellence becomes invisible to them, not because it isn't impressive, but because their mental baseline is far above the rest. In essence, they live in a world where brilliance is standard, and ordinary people simply can't keep up, making them blind to the very greatness everyone else sees. Number 3, their inner critic grows faster than their confidence. Sigma men are incredibly self-aware, and with that self-awareness comes a relentless inner critic. It doesn't matter how much they accomplish or how far ahead they are, their mind always finds something to scrutinize. Every decision, every action, every word is measured against a high, often invisible standard, and rarely does it feel like enough. The strange paradox is that the more competent they become, the louder this inner critic grows, keeping their confidence perpetually one step behind their actual achievements. This internal voice isn't just nitpicking, it's a survival mechanism honed over years of independence and self-reliance. Sigma men are accustomed to solving problems alone, thinking ahead and planning meticulously, which trains the brain to notice every potential flaw or weakness. While this makes them extraordinarily capable, it also makes self-recognition almost impossible. They see every imperfection with brutal clarity, but they barely register the countless victories that accompany those imperfections. Their accomplishments feel incidental, overshadowed by the mistakes or small gaps their mind insists on highlighting. This relentless self-assessment keeps Sigma men moving forward, but it comes at a cost. Achievements are never celebrated internally. Progress is only measured by how much more there is to reach. Even extraordinary results are downplayed because they focus on what could have been done better, faster, or smarter. Their brain is constantly cataloging what's missing rather than appreciating what exists. The effect is subtle but profound. Sigma men operate at levels that would impress anyone else, yet they remain blind to their own greatness. They carry a quiet frustration, a sense of, "I'm not there yet," even when they are far ahead of everyone else. Confidence never catches up to capability because the inner critic refuses to give it room to breathe. It's this unique tension, the drive for perfection combined with an inability to acknowledge mastery. that keeps Sigma men from seeing the extraordinary men they have already become. Their brilliance is always in motion, always evolving, but always just out of their own emotional reach. Number 4. They don't brag, so they don't get mirrors. Sigma men are not built for applause. They don't announce their victories, post their accomplishments, or fish for compliments. They operate in a quiet zone, letting results speak for themselves, and often those results are extraordinary. But here lies the paradox. Recognition is a mirror, and when you don't reflect your own greatness outwardly, the mirror never shows up. Without external acknowledgement, Sigma men are left only with their internal view, which is almost always far harsher than reality. The world tends to measure worth through visibility. People notice, praise, and validate what they can see. Sigma men, however, accomplish feats in silence, solving complex problems, mastering skills, or navigating social dynamics without ever stepping into the spotlight. This self-contained excellence becomes invisible even to themselves because they've removed the feedback loop that most people rely on to gauge their value. The quiet achiever suffers the irony of being exceptional, yet unaware of it. What makes this more intense is their natural skepticism toward validation. Sigma men often distrust praise, assuming it's exaggerated, superficial, or socially motivated. This mistrust means even when recognition comes, it may be dismissed or downplayed. As a result, they rely almost exclusively on self-assessment, which, thanks to their high standards and relentless inner critic, is rarely flattering. Their competence becomes internalized, stripped of the acknowledgement that gives it weight. This cycle feeds invisibility. The more they succeed silently, the less likely they are to notice their own impact. Achievements that would blow other people's minds seem mundane because the Sigma man knows all the moving parts, the effort behind the scenes, and the mistakes avoided along the way. Their life becomes a series of unseen victories, remarkable to everyone else but almost imperceptible to themselves. In essence, their humility and independence, which are some of their greatest strengths, ironically, prevent them from seeing the full scope of their greatness. They are exceptional without a mirror, and that very absence of reflection is what keeps them blind to the extraordinary life they are living every single day. Number 5. They see the cost of their competence, not the value. Sigma men are acutely aware of what it takes to achieve anything meaningful. Every skill they master, every challenge they overcome, comes with a price: hours of isolation, mental strain, calculated risks, and sacrifices that most people wouldn't tolerate. They carry a detailed ledger of effort, pain, and endurance, and this constant accounting makes it nearly impossible for them to celebrate the results. Their mind records the cost, but rarely registers the value. Where others might look at a Sigma man and see brilliance, precision, or talent, he only sees the sweat and struggle behind it. He remembers the sleepless nights, the failures, the doubts, and the countless small moments where things could have gone wrong. While most people measure achievement by the outcome, Sigma men are trapped in a detailed internal narrative of how hard they had to fight to even get there. The weight of competence becomes a burden rather than a badge of honor. This perspective has a hidden consequence. It blinds them to their own greatness. When you focus on the struggle rather than the mastery, accomplishments feel incidental. A Sigma man might flawlessly navigate a complex situation that would overwhelm anyone else, yet all he notices is the difficulty it took to succeed. He underestimates how rare his capabilities are because his own bar is anchored in effort and endurance, not impact or results. Ironically, this obsession with cost creates a cycle of invisibility. They achieve, they endure, they solve, but because they dwell on what it required, they rarely allow themselves to acknowledge the extraordinary value of what they accomplished. Their world is measured in struggle, not in triumph, This is why Sigma men often walk through life unaware of the power and influence they wield effortlessly. The brilliance is there, evident to everyone else, but for them, it is overshadowed by the ledger of hardship. Ultimately, the Sigma man's self-perception is shackled by his own meticulous accounting. He is blind to the extraordinary life he creates every day because his mind insists on cataloguing the price, not appreciating the priceless nature of his own competence. Number 6, they don't see how threatening they look to insecure people. Sigma men move through the world with a quiet confidence that doesn't beg for attention, yet it naturally commands it. They don't assert dominance, boast, or compete for status, but their presence alone can unsettle those who are insecure or dependent on social validation. Their calm, self-reliant energy, combined with sharp intellect and emotional control, creates an aura of competence that others often interpret as intimidating. What Sigma men fail to realize, though, is just how powerful and remarkable they appear to the outside world. In their eyes, they are simply living their lives, making logical choices and maintaining composure. They rarely stop to consider the effect they have on others. While insecure people might be visibly shaken or envious, Sigma men interpret this as social friction or misunderstanding, not as confirmation of their own capability and influence. The very traits that make them exceptional, independence, insight, and emotional control, are the same traits that silently command respect and even fear, yet they remain blind to it. This blindness has subtle consequences. Sigma men often underestimate the impact they have on their surroundings because they only measure themselves internally, comparing themselves to imagined ideals rather than the reality of how others perceive them. They don't need to perform to be seen, but because they don't, they fail to register just how extraordinary their natural presence is. While others might broadcast their confidence and receive validation, Sigma men embody it without acknowledgement, leaving them unaware of the silent power they wield. The irony is stark. The world often sees their brilliance before they do. People react instinctively to Sigma men, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with unease, and these reactions are often unrecognized signals of their greatness. Their influence is quiet but undeniable, yet they remain trapped in a state of underestimation, believing that being low profile or emotionally neutral diminishes their significance. In truth, it amplifies it. Their threat to insecurity, their calm mastery, and their effortless command are exactly what make them extraordinary, even if they themselves can't see it. Number 7, they undervalue what they didn't suffer for. Sigma men are wired to respect struggle. They believe that true value comes from effort, pain, and endurance, and anything that comes easily is automatically suspect. This mindset, while it drives discipline and mastery, also blinds them to their own innate talents. Skills or abilities that feel natural to them, reading people, thinking strategically, staying calm under pressure, or mastering a craft effortlessly, are often dismissed as unremarkable. They focus on the things they had to fight for, overlooking the brilliance that emerged without visible struggle. The paradox is brutal. The very traits that give Sigma men an edge in life, intelligence, intuition, adaptability, feel ordinary to them because they didn't require grinding, suffering, or intense struggle to acquire. They compare themselves to a self-imposed standard where only pain equals achievement, and by that metric, much of their own excellence doesn't count. This creates a strange internal imbalance. They see others' effort as heroic, but view their own seamless performance as mundane. This undervaluing is compounded by their independence. Sigma men rarely seek recognition, which means there's no external validation to counter their internal skepticism. When accomplishments feel too easy, they assume they're not impressive. They don't consider that effortless mastery, combined with precision and subtlety, is rarer and more valuable than struggle alone. Their mind catalogues what was hard, what left scars, and what demanded sacrifice, but leaves untouched the quiet brilliance that comes naturally. The result is a blind spot to their own greatness. Sigma men achieve feats that would overwhelm most people, yet they feel average because they didn't sweat visibly or fight openly to get there. Their ease becomes invisibility. They underestimate themselves because their mental benchmark is based not on impact, skill, or results, but on the perceived cost of effort. In essence, their disdain for anything that feels easy ironically hides their own extraordinary abilities. The skills that flow naturally, which others would see as rare genius, are overlooked because Sigma men insist on measuring value through suffering. Their greatness is always present, always visible to the outside world, yet it remains hidden from their own eyes. Number 8. Their mind keeps receipts of every flaw. Sigma men have an uncanny ability to notice details, patterns, and mistakes in themselves and in the world around them. This sharp perception, while a source of extraordinary competence, also comes with a hidden cost. Their brains meticulously catalogue every flaw, misstep, and shortcoming. Every decision they wish they'd made differently, every word spoken inappropriately, every tiny error becomes a permanent entry in their mental ledger. While others might brush off mistakes or celebrate achievements, Sigma men live in a constant cycle of self-accountability, and it clouds their ability to see their own greatness. This habit of keeping mental receipts is relentless. Successes are fleeting, while errors are stored in high resolution, replayed in vivid detail whenever they evaluate themselves. Even a minor slip can feel monumental because their mind refuses to let it go. The impressive feats they achieve, the problems they solve, and the obstacles they overcome are overshadowed by the imperfections their mind amplifies. They see themselves through the lens of what could have gone better, not what actually went right, which creates a chronic underestimation of their own abilities. This hyper-awareness also fuels a unique form of humility. Sigma men rarely brag or boast, partly because they're aware of every mistake behind the scenes. They understand the effort and risk that went into success, and that awareness prevents them from feeling entitled to praise. The problem is, this same humility becomes a blindfold. They cannot fully internalize their accomplishments because their own mental ledger is always weighing them down with what's wrong or incomplete. In effect, Sigma men are trapped in a paradoxical reality. Their attention to detail and accountability makes them extraordinarily capable, yet it also prevents them from appreciating the full scope of their impact. The brilliance that others see in them is often invisible to themselves because they are so busy keeping track of what they did wrong. Their mind's obsession with flaw and precision hides the very greatness it produces, creating a quiet, invisible mastery that exists fully in reality, but only partially in their perception. Number 9. They emotionally punish themselves for not being enough. Sigma men are relentless in their pursuit of excellence, but that drive comes with a hidden cost. They rarely forgive themselves. Every shortfall, every moment they feel they didn't meet their own high standards, becomes a source of internal punishment. Successes are rarely enough, and even accomplishments are weighed against the impossible ideal they hold themselves to. Their mind is a harsh judge, meting out silent reprimands for what they perceive as failures, and in doing so, it keeps them from truly seeing the greatness they embody. This internal punishment isn't about ego or pride, it's about accountability taken to an extreme. Sigma men expect perfection from themselves and rarely allow for human error. Even minor missteps or moments of indecision are catalogued, dissected, and emotionally relived as evidence that they are not enough. The achievements that others would celebrate or that objectively demonstrate competence and brilliance are overshadowed by this self-imposed scrutiny. They see the gap between who they are and who they believe they should be, and that gap looms larger than any success. What makes this dynamic particularly brutal is its self-reinforcing nature. The harder Sigma men work to improve, the more they notice what still needs fixing. Every victory highlights new areas for refinement, and every achievement is measured not by its impact, but by how far it falls short of perfection. This constant internal grading system prevents them from pausing to acknowledge their own value. It creates a sense of persistent insufficiency, even in the face of extraordinary capability. The result is a quiet, invisible greatness. Sigma men accomplish feats that would overwhelm most people, yet they rarely feel proud because the emotional ledger of shortcomings dominates their perception. Their brilliance, discipline, and resilience are undeniable to the outside world, but internally they live under the weight of emotional self-punishment. This relentless standard, while driving them to unparalleled mastery, keeps them blind to the fact that they are already exceptional. Their mind punishes what the world would celebrate, and in that contradiction lies the very reason Sigma men can't see their own greatness. Number 10. They don't measure progress, they only measure gaps. Sigma men are relentless in their pursuit of improvement, but this relentless focus comes with a hidden cost. They rarely acknowledge how far they've already come. Their minds are wired to see what's missing, what's unfinished, and what could be better. Every step forward is instantly weighed against an ideal they have yet to reach, making even extraordinary achievements feel incomplete. While others celebrate milestones, Sigma men are busy calculating the next challenge, the next obstacle, the next opportunity to improve, leaving their own greatness perpetually invisible to themselves. This mindset turns life into a continuous ladder of gaps. Each rung climbed exposes another one above it, and the higher they go, the more distant the top feels. A Sigma man might solve complex problems effortlessly, lead quietly with precision, or create outcomes others would call exceptional. Yet internally, he's only aware of the space between his current state and the hypothetical, perfect version of himself. Achievements are reduced to stepping stones, never destinations, and the mind rarely pauses long enough to appreciate mastery already achieved. The danger of this perspective is subtle but profound. By focusing almost exclusively on what's missing, Sigma men underplay the skills, insights, and capabilities that have made them successful. They fail to internalize the value of their accomplishments, assuming they are merely preparatory work for the future. Meanwhile, the outside world sees results that are extraordinary, even rare, yet the Sigma man experiences them as routine or insufficient. Their greatness is masked by an obsession with incompleteness. This constant measuring of gaps also fuels the inner critic and the emotional self-punishment that define their mindset. Every error, every limitation, and every opportunity for improvement is amplified, while victories are dismissed or minimized. The cycle ensures that recognition, both internal and external, is muted. In essence, Sigma men live in a world defined by what's missing rather than what's achieved. Their focus on gaps propels them to incredible heights, but it simultaneously blinds them to the greatness that exists at every step along the way. They are masters of progress, yet strangers to their own brilliance. Number 11. They see the world through moral accountability. Sigma men hold themselves to an almost unreasonably high standard of personal ethics and responsibility. Every choice, every action, and every word is measured against their own internal code, and they judge themselves more harshly than anyone else could. This deep sense of moral accountability shapes their decisions and behavior in ways that are quietly extraordinary, yet it also blinds them to their own greatness. They focus relentlessly on intention and principle, often overlooking the tangible results of their actions. To them, success is only meaningful if it aligns perfectly with their values, which means even their most impressive achievements can feel insufficient if they fall short morally in their own eyes. This mindset creates a constant internal audit. Sigma men evaluate themselves not just by what they accomplish, but by how they accomplish it. Did they act with integrity? Did they avoid shortcuts? Did they treat others fairly? Even when outcomes are exceptional, they weigh them against invisible moral standards, amplifying every perceived misstep. Achievements are never celebrated in isolation. They are filtered through a lens of ethical scrutiny, and if the process doesn't meet their code, the victory feels hollow. The consequence is subtle but profound. While others might see brilliance, decisiveness, or influence, Sigma men often feel their efforts are incomplete or inadequate because they don't fully meet the ethical ideal they hold themselves to. Their self-assessment is grounded not in results or skill, but in alignment with principle. This creates a blind spot. The extraordinary impact they have on the world is overshadowed by an internal ledger of moral accountability that rarely allows them to feel satisfied or proud. Paradoxically, it's this very rigor that makes Sigma men exceptional. Their decisions are precise, their influence calculated, and their actions consistent with a rare internal integrity. Yet the very framework that elevates them also keeps them blind to the greatness they embody. By judging themselves so harshly through moral filters, they inadvertently diminish the recognition of their own power, talent, and impact, leaving their brilliance quietly hidden, even from their own eyes. Number 12. Their greatness hides behind their humility. Sigma men are defined by their humility, not by a performative modesty, but by a profound internal understanding that greatness doesn't need an audience. They achieve, they master, they navigate life with precision and insight, yet they rarely announce it, showcase it, or demand recognition. This humility is their strength, allowing them to operate independently, make calculated decisions, and maintain control over their own lives. But it is also the reason their own greatness often remains invisible to them. By refusing to perform or seek validation, they deprive themselves of the very mirrors that would reflect the scale of their achievements. The quiet nature of their excellence creates an internal paradox. While others might rely on applause, accolades, or external markers to feel accomplished, Sigma men rely entirely on self-assessment. And because their internal standards are impossibly high, accomplishments that would inspire awe in anyone else feel ordinary to them. They discount their impact, seeing it as the natural outcome of doing what they always do, rather than recognizing it as extraordinary. Their humility acts like a veil, hiding the brilliance of their actions and the magnitude of the influence they wield quietly. What makes this even more striking is the contrast between perception and reality. The world often notices Sigma men before they notice themselves. People see the competence, calm, intelligence, and precision in action and recognize it as rare, exceptional, even intimidating. But the Sigma man, fully immersed in his internal compass and unwilling to exaggerate or perform, remains blind to the power he projects. Humility turns visibility into invisibility, mastery into understatement, and impact into quiet routine. In essence, their greatness exists fully in reality, yet remains partially concealed from their own eyes. Their humility is not weakness, but a strategic, almost philosophical choice, a refusal to let ego define their worth. And while this choice allows them to live with integrity and control, it simultaneously prevents them from fully acknowledging the extraordinary man they have become. Sigma men are exceptional. but their own humility ensures that much of their brilliance remains unseen, even to themselves, creating a silent, understated form of greatness that the world recognizes long before they do. Sigma men live in a paradox. Their brilliance, discipline, and quiet mastery shape the world in ways few ever notice, yet they themselves often remain blind to it. Every skill, every achievement, and every act of resilience is filtered through their internal standards, their independence, their humility, and their relentless inner critic. The very traits that make them extraordinary, their calm, their precision, their emotional control, their strategic mind, are the same traits that obscure their own reflection. They move through life solving problems others couldn't touch, navigating chaos with effortless composure and influencing people and outcomes in ways that often go unseen. Yet because they rely on internal validation, focus on gaps rather than progress, and weigh achievements against impossible ideals, they rarely pause to recognize just how exceptional they are. This is the silent tragedy and the hidden power of the Sigma man. The world sees his greatness clearly, sometimes even reveres it, while he quietly underestimates himself. But it's also a reminder that true power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, moves in shadows, and exists in the moments others can't measure. The Sigma man's greatness is not just in what he does, but in how he chooses to live, independently, authentically, and with an integrity that refuses to bend for validation. It is subtle, understated, yet transformative, affecting everything and everyone around him, even if he never fully realizes it. So if you've been watching and following this journey into the mind of a Sigma man, take a moment to appreciate not just the insight you've gained, but the reflection it might offer. Recognize the quiet power in those who live by their own rules, and understand that greatness often doesn't announce itself, it simply exists. If this video resonated with you, hit that subscribe button to stay connected with more deep dives into human behavior and hidden power. Don't forget to like this video if you found it valuable, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. We want to hear your perspective. Your support keeps this community alive, and together we can uncover truths that most people overlook. Let's continue this journey of insight, awareness, and understanding, because greatness, quiet or loud, deserves to be recognized.